Okay. Well, that was an easy one. Maybe you guys could send me some more easier ones. Um, okay. Okay. I'm getting a sign here. Tell them everything you mentioned is. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Sorry, my mind is racing here. Okay. Some of these resources that I'm mentioning, we've linked to in the blog. So we have, if you go to STR blog, which is str.typepad.com, or go to str.org, and there's a link at the bottom of I think the homepage, right? Is it the bottom of the homepage? Okay. Go to str.org. You'll find our blog. And we've posted some of the resources that we've talked about here. A bulletproof CD set. Actually, let me just promo a couple of these. Okay, for parents, like I said, some of the stuff I've mentioned here is available in a CD set that we've put together. These are 3 of my talks for parents, youth leaders, youth pastors, Christian educators. It's called Bulletproof: Fortifying Young Minds with the Truth. This is available at str.org. That's a great resource. We put something together for students called Truth in the Real World. It's an audio CD. Eventually, I think we want to get to some videos for young people, but this is an audio CD with a student workbook inside that just tries to lay a proper foundation of truth, thinking properly about truth, moral truth, and religious truth. So there's a 3 CD set with a workbook, and then there's also a PDF Leader's Guide that's available there. The Bulletproof podcast, like I mentioned, I don't know how many podcasts are there now, but a number of podcasts with some real practical ideas to help parents and youth leaders and educators more on this. And so go to our blog and you'll see we've listed a number of those resources, and there's going to be some more resources I'm going to point to as well. Okay, let's go to a couple more questions here. We're going to take, this is from Josh. I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name. Queckle, from YouTube, and Joshua asks, how do we balance quote, trust me, I'm your parent, unquote, with quote, question authority claims, a healthy skepticism. So how do we balance this? I'm an authoritative source on kind of knowledge, and we want you to have a healthy skepticism and question authority claims. Well, I think it kind of corresponds to the levels of development of our children. So I think early on, our young kids need to learn. They need to learn about authority. They need to learn about a proper authority. They need to learn submission to authority. They need to learn to respond well to no. So my kid wants candy for breakfast. I say no, right? And so at that point, I'm not going to reason with my 2.5-year-old son Jonah, who almost every morning, he'll get into the candy jar and he'll hold a lollipop and go, "Can I have this?" And it's breakfast time. I say no. Now I don't reason with him because he's not ready to be reasoned with at that stage. What I actually want to develop in him is a submission to my authority, and really help him to learn how to submit to authority generally, because we all our life we're submitting to authority. So so early on, I'm going to want him to learn to submit to authority and trust me as the authority. So my authority is going to be backed up, hopefully, by a loving context. Hopefully I'm a tender, loving father who balances well the rules and the discipline with the love and affection. Okay. So one goal I've always had with my kids is to be very affectionate with them, the boys and the girls, especially with my boys, knowing that the average boy gets a lot less affection than the average girl. So very affectionate with my boys, and so there I'm just building a relationship of hopefully trust. And then as I teach them, they're just at that point it's dad, and so they're trusting me. And so then as they get older, what I've tried to do with my kids from early on is to get them to start just questioning in general. And I actually, as they get older, my wife and I, we wrestled with this. It's a difficult thing for a parent to kind of transition into, your kid now is 4th, 5th, 6th grade, 7th grade, they're in junior high, and they're starting to question you, we wrestle with that. That's a difficult thing because sometimes you feel like, well, they're questioning your authority. But so here's kind of the way we've kind of tried to balance it in our home. We've said when they are able to kind of get to that point where they're able to reason, we tell them, look, now we're going to start explaining to you why we do what we do. And so when I think they have the ability to understand the reasoning behind a rule, for instance. So I have got a particular boundary, here it is, and they start kind of pushing up against that. I'm going to realize, okay, now it's time for them maybe to understand the reason behind the rule. So I'm going to explain to them, this is why Mom and I have this rule. Here's our thinking on this. I'm going to give them the reasons for the rule and help them to see that all of our rules we want to back up with good reasons. And we've told our kids that if they can provide, if they disagree with a rule, and they can provide better reasons, or they can provide good reasons for us to lay that rule aside or reject that rule or boundary or whatever it is, so whether it's a curfew or whether it's I don't know who they're hanging out with or how much time they're on the computer or social media or whatever it might be, if they can give us better reasons for changing the rule or eliminating the rule, we're open to it. And so we always keep kind of an open door policy with our kids. You can always question our rules. Excuse me. So you can always question our rules. That's okay, but what we want is, we don't want you to say, oh, I don't like that rule, Mom and Dad. What I always ask them is why. Okay, so give me your reasons. And if you can come up with compelling reasons, you could convince me to change my rule. And I think in that way we've helped them develop just a healthy skepticism, a kind of an appropriate skepticism that's not disrespectful to authority. Now, another way we've done this with our own kids is we ask them what they're learning, whether it's in church or VBS or Sunday school or from wherever. We'll talk about what they're learning. Sometimes they'll tell us about things that they're taught that we don't think are right. And so we have to, I think, model kind of a healthy balance of skepticism and yet respect for authority. And so, never questioning the intentions of that teacher, but say their Sunday school teacher teaches them something we think is incorrect, then we're going to say so, and we're going to give our reasons, why. So I think that's kind of how we've done it. Early on, we're helping them to submit to authority and not question the authority claims, but as they get older, realize then, okay, now it's time for them to start being able to deal with the reasons and start, and capitalize on that fact that they are asking the why, and also being humble enough to if I've got an unreasonable rule, I want to change it, and if I've done something wrong, I think there's another way that I think we help do this with our kids as best as I can, is when I realize I'm wrong, is to say sorry to my kids, and that definitely helps with the trust factor too. So hopefully those are some helpful thoughts, Joshua. Okay, great questions. Okay, let's go to a question by Terry Palmer. Okay, and I think what I'll do as I scroll down here, it looks like there's just a ton of questions. I'm not going to be able to get to everybody's questions. We had originally scheduled this from 7 to 8, and it is already 8 o'clock. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to answer this question. I'm going to pull out some resources here for the rest of you to take a look at some of the resources I've used with my own kids, just some real practical things, some books, some videos. And then maybe I'll try and take a couple more questions, and we'll hang out for a little bit longer past 8 o'clock, anyone who wants to still hang out, okay? All right, so this is from Terry Palmer. What are some ways you can ensure that your children are not renting your faith? How can we stretch them to own their faith before they leave the home? Yeah, that's a great question, important question. I think when they're in junior high, you want to start giving them apologetics. You want to start teaching them the why behind the what. And I think the why helps them to begin to take ownership of their own faith. And so what you can even do is you can begin questioning while they're in the safety of your home. as a fourth, fifth, sixth grader, you start asking your kids now, why? You start forcing them to defend the things that you've taught them growing up. So, you think God exists? Really, what reasons do you have to think that God exists? And start capitalizing on their developing mind and start asking them the why. You ask them the why first before they go off to college, and eventually they're going to get the why. So I think our young people should be. Here's my approach with my kids and with the kids I was youth pastoring, is I want to inoculate them, not isolate them. So I don't want to hide them out and kind of overprotect them from the challenges of their faith. Actually, my strategy as a parent is to be the first one to introduce them to the objections to the faith and force them to really wrestle with those. And then I'm going to come alongside them and then equip them with a good apologetic, with good reasons, with good answers. And I'm going to help them see that these challenges that they're going to face can be answered. And I'm hopefully then what that's going to help them do is to begin to grab onto these reasons as their own. And so I think that's one of the biggest ways for them not to rent the faith of their parents, but to develop ownership of their own faith, is to have their own reasons. And so for them to be introduced to apologetics at a very young age and to see that there are good reasons for faith. And then secondly, and both of these kind of go back to that four-step approach that I laid out in the beginning, equip their minds with theology and apologetics, but then engage them in experiences. I want them also to have experiences where they're living this out before they get off to college. And so, like these mission trips that we do through Stand to Reason, every one of my kids has already been on some of those mission trips. My oldest daughter, who's in college, has been on, I think, 2 or 3 Berkeley trips and has been on 2 or 3 Utah trips. My son, who's 12 years old, he's been on probably even more trips than my college-age daughter. My 11-year-old has been on these trips. My 6-year-old has been on these trips. So we're taking them at very young ages. We want to model for them. What does it look like for us to be living in this world as ambassadors of Christ, as missionaries for Christ? And so I think one of the ways, when they have their own reasons, when they know the what and they know the why, and they can confidently engage their unbelieving friends, then I'm going to figure out ways. I'm going to challenge them to engage with their unbelieving friends. I'm going to take them out on situations where I'm engaging with unbelievers. If I'm having a conversation with my neighbor about, the gospel or about a question or objection, I'm going to try to get my kid involved in that conversation. For instance, when we've had, missionaries show up at our door, we've had Mormon missionaries, we've had Jehovah's Witnesses who come to the door. When we set up that appointment for them to come back, I always say, hey, is it okay if my kids come and sit with us? And they look at me kind of strange and say, well, sure, I guess so. And all 4 or 5 or whoever's home, all the kids pile in at the table with my wife and I, and we engage, and so they get to see us engage. And so I think it's giving them the apologetic, giving them the why, and then also helping them to live this out, engage them in experiences. Okay, so that's, I think, a key way. All right, what are some resources to do this? Well, let me start with some resources for young people, and I think I'll go from younger to older. And I think with my youngest kids, I think one of the greatest resources I have in training them is this. Yep, I know that's maybe you think, oh yeah, the Bible. Well, of course. No, I'm serious. I want them grounded in this from the earliest of ages, and so I've actually found some good resources to help them get introduced to the Bible. Here's one great book. Crossway has put this out. Crossway puts out great resources. They're trusted publisher. But for your youngest ones, the Big Picture Story Bible is a great book. I'm actually reading this right now to my 2.5-year-old, and I love this because it gives the big picture. It gives the whole kind of story of Scripture, and kind of helps them step back and kind of see the big picture of Scripture. So that's a great one for your younger kids. So that's a great introduction to the Bible. Then as my kids have gotten older, we've had them read the Picture Bible. This is by David Cook, and it's kind of a cartoon type Bible, but it was very engaging. Our son, when he was like 6 and 7, I mean, he just devoured this thing, and it was just a way to get him into the story of Scripture and get familiar with the plot, the characters, the details, and so I'm just getting him prepared for eventually, the real deal, right? Another great book that I've used for my kids is the Children's Illustrated Bible. This is a little older book. I'm not sure, this might be something you'd have to kind of pick up on, Amazon used books or whatever. But it's a Children's Illustrated Bible. The publisher is Dorling Kindersley, DK. Good luck on finding this one. The thing I loved about this one is that, again, it kind of broke up the Bible into kind of some key narratives, and it helped give my kids. I use it to help give them, again, a big picture of the message, the story of Scripture, give them the larger narrative, so that all these smaller parts can fit into that larger picture. And so I used this a lot when they were, I think early elementary age. There's some good historical facts in here and pictures and that kind of thing, so it was pretty engaging. It was a great way to kind of take small chunks of Scripture and put them into the larger one, because eventually I want them to get here. We've tried to help use some of these other Bibles to give them a really good foundation to start reading this, and now they're starting to read this on their own, and I'm reading it with them, and so that's key. That's the key foundation, of course, Scripture. And frankly, we're doing a horrible job at this when you look at biblical illiteracy rates. Our people in our churches, not just our kids, just know virtually nothing about Scripture. So start there. Our second biggest tool in our family is this. This is a book. See, it's a book. This one in particular, Sherlock Holmes. We in our family want our kids to be readers. So what we've done is, from earliest of ages, we read with them. Or I'm sorry, we read to them. As they get older and they can read themselves, now we're reading with them. So it's a combination of them reading to us or us helping them read. Eventually, we want them to read on their own. And then we also want them to see us reading on our own. And that's kind of the process that we've used to try and develop our kids to be readers. Early on, we try to have our kids just surrounded with books, because these are huge tools in their education. We've got them in. We bought this whole series of illustrated classics that our kids have devoured. Just a great way to introduce them to classics. My wife and I, we homeschool our younger kids, and we've kind of become, I don't know, we've kind of made kind of real modest goals. Sometimes the whole homeschooling thing can be very overwhelming for parents, and we've kind of got 3 key goals. We want our kids to love Jesus, okay, follow Christ, know what they believe, why they believe it, right? So there's that kind of spiritual discipleship component. And related to that is their moral formation. We want to develop a strong character. We want to help them develop virtue. Then we have 2 other very simple goals. One is to develop a work ethic. We want our kids to be hard workers, and so we tried to help them to work at very young ages. So even as soon as they're walking, they can help clear the table, and we're helping them to develop a work ethic in them, so that they learn how to discipline themselves, they learn how to work hard, and then if we add to that then a love of reading. If we can just do those 2 things, give them a work ethic and help them to love reading, man, they can do whatever they want after that. I mean, they'll have the motivation with the work ethic and the discipline, and then if they can read, they'll be able to learn whatever they want. And so so we've just kind of taken some real modest goals. So reading is key, foundational, fundamental, I think, to the discipleship of our kids. There's a reason why God gave us His Word in written form. He didn't just put it in a DVD, right? He didn't wait a couple thousand years later till we had this technology, because there's something about writing that structures the mind. The written word structures the mind in a way that images cannot. Now, I'm not against using images. We use images. In fact, there was one question I saw on Twitter that was a link to a student ministry philosophy that we had posted. We posted that as an example. they were suggesting they don't, use gimmicks, or they don't use videos, or, images. And that's, I can understand that, but we do use some images at STR. We use images, we use video. I use PowerPoint in my presentations. I use it in a very specific way, but we don't rely on those things. And from earliest ages, we can't rely on those things. Don't rely on video. Rely on the written word, and give them a foundation there in the written word and in reading before you use resources like, where is it? This. This is a great resource. Great DVD resources. What's in the Bible? Buck Denver asks, what's in the Bible? Phil, I think it's Vischer, who's the excuse me, creator of Veggie Tales, has created this great series. I think if you go to the website what'sinthebible.com, great resources, DVD resources, really good videos that give a great overview of the Scripture. So if you want a good DVD resource for your kids that are very, I think, educational, again, I don't rely upon those things, but they're a supplemental thing. But these are really good. And there's a whole set that goes through the Old Testament, New Testament. It's what'sinthebible.com. Okay, so that's, okay, those are for young kids. Okay, these are for young kids as well. Our friend Bill Craig from Reasonable Faith, right? William Lane Craig has just done a huge service for us by writing these kids' books. And we bought the whole series. There are 2, 4, 6, 8, looks like 10 books in this series that are part of the series called What is God Like? And it goes through the attributes of God in with these cartoons of Brown Bear and Red Goose. And it covers God's eternal nature. God is forever. God is everywhere, right? God is all-powerful. God is all-loving. God is all-knowing. The greatness of God. God is 3 persons, so it even dives into the Trinity. God is self-sufficient. God is all good. God is spirit. And it's a great way to teach your kids some of the basic attributes of God. In fact, I think I heard Bill say that they've gotten responses from adults who say, man, these books have been helpful for me as an adult in learning the attributes of God, because many adults don't even know the attributes of God. So that series by Bill Craig is a great resource, and I think we've posted those on the blog as well. So we posted a link to where you can get those on the blog. All right, so maybe for the kids who are a little bit older, another great resource from Bill Craig, The Defense Never Rests. I've been using this with my 11-year-old and my 12-year-old, and we started these a little bit ago. There's a leader's guide and there's a student one. Very simple. It's just kind of fill in the blank. The leader's guide gives you, it's just basic fill in the blank. Basically, what this is not entertaining, and I think sometimes there's that temptation to want to have entertaining stuff. I think that's overrated and sometimes actually detrimental to the learning of our kids when we feel like it has to be fun. My wife and I have tried to stay away from that word fun. Like, you pick your kid up from Sunday school. Hey, was it fun? You pick your kid up from school. Did you have fun today? And I think we can communicate like, hey, the purpose of everything is to have fun. And so I like this because it's very, very simple. It's fill in the blank. What it does is it gives me permission to have conversations with my kids about apologetics. And what Bill does here is he goes through basic arguments for God's existence, and then some basics about theology, and it's a great starter book for young kids. Oh, sorry. Okay, another great resource from my good friend Doug Powell. He's got a whole series of these. This one's called Jesus Eyewitness. I brought this one in. We of course, this one's available at str.org. You can get this one. It's a really kind of highly interactive book, and it goes through the evidence for the resurrection. And I had on Sunday, Easter Sunday, I knew we were going to be in the car for a while, driving to church and then driving to family, family dinner and that kind of stuff. So I had my son grab this and put this in the car so that they could look at it and look at, hey, okay, when you look through the book and just give me one argument why we think Jesus actually rose from the dead, one historical argument. And, and it's a great interactive book, and it's a kind of a tool, and it was kind of a way to, while we're driving, instead of just, pop in the DVD in the DVD player and kind of anesthetize my kids. I wanted to try and engage them. So great resource. Okay, for older kids, I already mentioned the for junior high, maybe high school, Truth in the Real World, a CD set that we offer at Stand to Reason. Let me give you one really good book. This book is called Welcome to College. I don't know if you can see that there. Welcome to College, from my good friend Jonathan Morrow. Jonathan, I'm promoting your book, man. Excellent book. This is a great book put out by Kunkle, great publisher. Great book to give to students, seniors who are going off to college. Great book that just has a broad number of topics, some great philosophy and apologetics, some real practical stuff. Welcome to College by Jonathan Morrow is a great resource. If you want some DVD resources, here's some good stuff. I think especially the first two volumes in this series. This is the True You stuff. Series number 1, Does God Exist? And then series number 2 is The Bible Reliable. Those are good stuff. They're pretty intense, challenging, and so I would say definitely kids who have had training in this can handle it, or upperclassmen, college students. I've even seen churches actually show that to adults because it's some good stuff. So okay, so those are some just real practical resources. All right, I think we'll take maybe a couple more questions and then wrap it up. Anyone who wants to hang out here. Okay, don't forget everything that we've linked to, or everything I think I've said here is linked on the blog. And let's see, Amy's telling me we will save unanswered questions. Okay, so for those of you whose questions we don't get to, we will save some of those to do some video blogs later. Okay, so watch our blog on Mondays. We always post a video answer to some question that we've received. So we'll keep some of the questions that you've given here that we won't get to, and we'll use some of those as the questions for our video blog answers on Mondays. Okay. All right. Here's a great question from Scott Richardson. Can I get you some water or juice? Yes, thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. All right. That was an easy one. Okay, here's a great question from Brooke Geisler. What if your youth kids come from broken or breaking homes and the parents are not involved with the church? How do you reach out to parents? Yeah, wow. Actually, I think you've got a good idea there. I mean, you asked the question. I think a lot of people say, how would you reach those kids? You're asking, how do you reach out to the parents? I think that's one of the starting points. Is if you've got kids that are coming from a broken home and maybe the parents aren't believers, somehow they're plugged into your church. You got to go after those parents. That's got to be primary. And so it's just however your church would reach out to unbelievers. So if you're connected with those kids, or maybe it's you and another couple are leading the third grade Sunday school class, and so one of these third graders comes from a broken home, but his grandma's bringing him or whatever. Well, you and that other couple who are leading the class, maybe figure out how to do some things outside of the church. Do a barbecue at your house and invite the parents to come over. Figure out how to begin building a relationship with those parents and start reaching them. How would we reach any unbelieving parents? I think maybe your church has some specific programs, but I would say the key is building a relationship with those folks. So having them and their child over to your house, and maybe get some other parents involved in that, and even help those parents understand, hey, we're inviting little Johnny's mom and dad over. Or he comes from a broken home. We're just inviting mom or whatever. Comes from a broken home. She's an unbeliever. Let's really love on her and just be Christ to her. And so I think you're on the right track. Reach out to those parents, and I think that's going to be the best way to reach those kids. Hopefully, I think more and more churches need to think about about resources for broken homes. I think as our society continues to break down, as the family breaks down, we're just going to find more dysfunction in the culture. And so I think we need to think carefully through this as churches. Like at our church, we have a lady who's, I don't know if she's full-time or part-time on staff. I think she's a full-time staff member, and she's a counselor. So one of our full-time paid staff positions at church is a counselor as a resource for our church. And I think that's huge, because sometimes pastors, youth leaders, we're not equipped to deal with some of the more serious things, and we need some help. And I think that some professional help is really good. So maybe there's some resources at your church can provide that way. So, all right, we'll maybe take a couple more here. Oh yeah, okay. Let me also mention, hey, this video this live webcast is being recorded, and so we will actually have this video available to watch later on our blog. We'll post it. So, we've talked about a lot of things. If you want to go back and watch it, or if you want to send it off to someone else, you can do that. We'll provide a link on our blog. So go to str.org and check out our blog, and we'll just post a bunch of these resources we've already talked about, and also the video of this as well. Okay. Okay, here's a good question. Jonathan Porta. He says, we are debating Christian school versus public school for our second grade daughter who has been in a Christian school. My wife is worried about the influence of non-Christians in public education and how they will affect her. Thoughts? What are your thoughts? Well, this is an issue that my wife and I have thought a lot, tried to think carefully through over the last probably 6 years, as we came to a point. Just kind of give you some background. Our oldest daughter, who's now 19, she went K through 6 in public school, and really in 5th grade we started to identify some things that we weren't happy about, that we saw developing in her life. Things that had to do with character, things that had to do with kind of influences of peers, things that had to do with work ethic. And so we, by the time she was in 6th grade, we realized we needed to do something different. Now, I'm not saying this is what all parents have to do. I'm telling you what we had to do. And we realized it was very difficult for us in our situation to have our daughter go Monday through Friday to a public school where, frankly, probably almost all of the teachers, the majority of teachers that I'm aware of that she had K through 6 were unbelievers, and were educating her. We weren't able to kind of deprogram some of that and debrief all of that, and even know all that she was taught and what was being modeled for her. So it kind of caused us to rethink education. And so with her, we ended up kind of moving her into a public junior high school. And then she went back into, she went to a Christian junior high school for 7th and 8th grade, a great local Christian junior high school here. And then in high school, she went 9 and 10 at the local public high school. Thank goodness, between her sophomore and junior year, she went to Summit Ministries, the 2-week camp. Had a huge impact on her. She started her junior year at the local public high school. Then she came to us of her own and said, I'm sinking here. The peer pressure is too much. I'm struggling. She said, get me out of here. And so then we were able to put her into a Christian school after that for her junior year and senior year. It was huge. So we've had kids in public school, but anyway, we took about a 9-month period of time when she was kind of in 6th grade to really think about education. And we a couple convictions that we had. Number one, we have got to be the primary educators, or we're primarily responsible for her education. So now again, that can play out different ways, but we just thought, hey, we have got to take more ownership of this. And so what we decided, and we did a lot of research in those 9 months, and I asked a lot of questions and talked to a lot of people, but what we decided to do with our younger ones is we decided to homeschool them. And there were a number of reasons for that. One, was spiritual and moral. We realized the most effective way we were going to be able to disciple our kids under Christ was to homeschool them. And what we realized what we needed to do, and we saw this just with our oldest daughter, was that we had to offer our kids at very young ages some protection. And I kind of use the analogy of taking my kids surfing. I live in Southern California. I love to surf. I've been surfing for years, and I want my kids to surf, and my older kids do surf with me. But when I was teaching them how to surf, I mean, my ultimate goal was that my kids could get on a surfboard and paddle out to the lineup and surf waves on their own, like I do, right? But how did I get to that end goal? Well, at first there was an appropriate amount of protection, so I started taking my kids in the water when they're 2, 3 years old, 4 years old, and I started getting them on the boards. But I wouldn't take them way out to the lineup, to the big waves. We'd stay kind of in the foam. We'd stay in the small waves. And I'm giving them, there's appropriate amount of protection, right? I'm not letting them go anywhere that's deeper than their knees when they're 3, 4 years old. And so I'm giving them appropriate amount of protection so that they can learn some things, so they can develop some skills, they can develop some comfort, so that eventually as they get older, as they've, as they 9, 10 years old, they can swim on their own, they're comfortable in the water and the waves, they can now come out and surf the waves on their own. But see, there was appropriate amount of protection I gave them early on. And I think, especially given our cultural context and the aggressive secular culture that we live in and the challenges that we face on a number of different levels, I think we have to be very careful as parents to give our kids appropriate protection. Now, that protection is for the purpose of them laying a good foundation for them. Like my kids, they know that I'm not just trying to protect them from the big bad world and keep them safe for the rest of their life. No, I'm giving them appropriate protection so I can train them and so they can develop some character and virtue and develop some good habits so that eventually when they're ready, I'm going to launch them into this world. I want them to get into the big waves. And so I think with your second graders, all of us who have second graders and kids that young, yes, we should be not anxious, but we should be concerned about the influences of non-Christians in public education. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't put your kid in public education. Some will make that argument. I'm not going to make that argument. I know we're all in different circumstances, so I don't think I can make that blanket assessment. For us, we realized the best way for us was going to be to homeschool. Not everyone can do that. But if you can't do that, there might be another option, maybe a Christian school. But if you do put your kid, if your kid is in public schooling, I just know this from experience. You have got to be on your game. You have got to be, you've got to be involved. You got to be knowing. You got to be on top of the content that they're being taught. You cannot assume that they are getting good academic teaching and good moral teaching. I mean, so you just got to be on top of it, and you got to figure out how to regularly debrief what's going on. We had to try and figure out how do we extract from our daughter the things that she's being taught. It was a challenge so that we could help her navigate. And frankly, our kids that are in second and third grade, they can't navigate this stuff on their own. When they, we're teaching them to respect authority, and so here's the authority, the second, third grade teacher who's saying to them, this such and such is true, and they take it on authority at that point. Well, that's the authority that we've put in front of them, and so yeah, I think it's a huge challenge. I think you should be very concerned about it. I have huge concerns about public education, particularly when it comes to the moral issue. I mean, I've been on high school and junior high campuses a lot in the last 20 years, and I talk to students all the time, and I'm in that world. I watch that world carefully. I watch youth culture, and I think one of the most immoral places in America is the high school campus and the college campus. The public high school campus and public college campus. And I think a lot of people who are involved in those, public education, that probably would affirm that. It's the stuff that they're seeing our young kids involved with, and the stuff they're seeing our teachers involved with. I mean, you constantly hear stories in the news about teachers, suspended for, some kind of immorality. So anyway, those are some thoughts I'd throw out there that I've wrestled with myself. I think actually the whole idea of education is something that I think Christians are going to have to wrestle seriously with, uh, given our cultural context. In public education is a real challenge. So anyway, okay. Hopefully those thoughts help. Maybe we'll take. Okay. One more. Let me search through one more here. Uh, okay, there's so many good questions. It's hard to even pick one here. All right, I guess I'll just go to the maybe the top one here. Okay, this will be the last question we'll take. Comes from John Wilkinson. John says, my wife and I teach pre-K for Sunday school. One of the biggest challenges for us is making the gospel clear and easy for them to understand. How would you go about this? All right. Let me say a couple things on this and maybe offer a resource. Okay. I think at those younger levels, especially you're saying you teach pre-K, right? So I think we're talking, maybe 3 and 4 year olds. At that stage, and I think what I'm coming to the conclusion that classical education has some real good insights for, I think, the church and how we educate our kids. So if you don't know about anything about classical education, here's what I would encourage you to do. Do a Google search. Say, what is classical education? And I believe the first article that will pop up is an article by a lady named Susan Wise Bauer. Read that article. Very good article to give you an overview of what classical education is. But there's kind of 3 distinct stages of classical education that I've talked a little bit about here. There's the grammar stage, and that's the earliest ages. So kind of if you're looking at K through 4th grade, that's the grammar stage. At that stage, our methodology is to really teach them the what. It's to give them the facts, to give them the concrete facts. And so at that stage, one of the things that's very helpful is memorization. So if I'm teaching pre-K Sunday school, I want my kids to memorize a lot of the basic facts. So maybe some basic Bible verses, attributes of God, or one thing that you can do is a catechism. And we've done that with our kids. In fact, that's one resource I forgot to bring. There's a little booklet called, I can't remember the name of it. It's like the Children's Catechism. It's a very small little book, very simple. You ask a question, there's a question, and then there's a little answer. And we've taken our kids through that and helped them to memorize these basic answers to these questions. And in that, they get they memorize basic facts about the gospel. And at that point, their understanding is going to be limited. There's certain things they can understand, but at that point, at that stage of their education, there's a lot of just wanting them to learn the facts. The grammar stage, you're teaching them the facts, the what. You're getting those, they're sponges, so you're capitalizing on their natural wonder and their inquisitiveness, and so you're giving them a lot of the what. There's a lot of memorization that can go on at that stage. And so even, actually, I think when our kids were like 5 and 6 years old, we have them memorize the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed, and just memorize it. It just gives the basic facts, because what I'm going to do is lay that foundation, give them that content that they're not going to fully understand yet. The gospel is not going to be clear to them at that stage. Maybe some very basics about the gospel, but I'm preparing them ultimately to be able to understand the gospel. And so as they get up into, the next stage of classical education is called the logic stage, kind of 5th grade through 8th grade. That's when then you're giving them the why. You're explaining, this is when they're starting to understand more of the why behind the gospel. So now it's not just the what, but it's the why. And then the rhetoric stage is that kind of high school, 9th through 12th. And that's where you're having them articulate it. And that's really where you help to see how well do they understand it. And so I think pre-K is a lot of memorization, they're sponges at that stage. They can memorize a lot, and just get them things that they can memorize. Scripture, creeds, catechism, those things will then begin to lay a foundation for you to work with later. So they'll have those facts, and then in the logic stage, then you take those facts, mix it with logic and with a why, and so then you're helping them to think, and ultimately they'll get to that understanding. So I think that's what we've done with our own kids in our own home. And frankly, I think that's a lot more effective than a lot of the curriculum I see out there by Christian publishers that always try to give our kids some kind of practical thing they're going to take home with them to implement right away. I'm not sure that that's the most helpful thing at in that stage of development. So, okay, well, it's 8:30, and for some of you, that means it's 11:30. If there are any East Coasters still out there, is there any? Just curious, any East Coasters who are still hanging out with us? I'm just curious. Just put up a quick comment. Say, yeah, I'm here. Anyway, okay, so gosh, an hour and a half flew by. I hope that we've been able to provide some helpful resources. Again, go to our blog. There's more. We've linked a bunch of these resources there. This video will be available for you to watch if you missed parts of it. And then also, I would encourage you maybe subscribe to the Bulletproof podcast that I do on a regular basis. You can go back and listen to the archived podcast where I've laid out a lot of practical stuff, and we'll continue to update that. And hopefully, we'd love to hear some of your feedback. If you found this helpful, please let us know. Maybe we'll do another one of these here again in the near future. So, because there's certainly a lot of questions that we didn't get to, a lot more help we can offer. So, I hope that's been helpful for you, folks. Thank you for tuning in, and check out str.org for more resources. Hey, hi, John on the East Coast. It's 11:30. Thanks for hanging out with us. And Aaron Hansen of Central Time. What's that? 10:30, right? Okay, I'll throw you a bone too. Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.